All right, let's also talk about what's happening on the coronavirus front and what that all means for the reopening trade. Because we're watching vaccinations, which have been climbing. In fact, just this weekend, 5.3 million vaccines were administered across the United States. That's according to the Centers for Disease Control. Meghan Fitzgerald is joining us now. She is a private equity investor. She's the author of Ascending Davos, and she's a healthcare policy professor at Columbia University. Friend of the program, I think we'd say. Meg, it's great to see you. As we watch what is going on with vaccinations, are you now encouraged by the progress we seem to have made? And is it consistent enough and sort of uniform enough across the country that we are going to reach herd immunity in 3 months, 6 months? I mean, what does that look like?
Yeah, good question. Nice to see you guys. So 87 million doses have been given. We've hit the 2.1 million doses per day. All good news. 17% of the population is now vaccinated. The J&J approval next week now gives us 3 vaccines to have in our armamentarium. But to be balanced, when you double click on the data, only 9% of the population has received both doses. So the progress state by state is really what you have to look at. And I think there's still room for efficiency and certainly equity. And what I've been most concerned about is the seniors, those over age 65. And there's still areas for improvement. Florida has 35% of its seniors vaccinated, but down in Pennsylvania, only 28% of the seniors have been vaccinated. There seems to be a 6-week downward trend in hospitalizations and deaths. But in the last 7 days, we're seeing a bit of an uptick, and we're also looking at variants. So I think there's still some work to go. Personally, I think we see herd immunity on the back end of the summer. I'm not as bullish on the front end just because of the logistics, just because of the distribution.
You know, Mike, speaking of those variants, something you flagged in your note to us is efficacy and misunderstandings around that. And granted, we've all, as public citizens, had to learn a lot about, immunobiology or whatever in the last year or so. Can you explain maybe what those data actually suggest and what maybe people are getting wrong? And I think maybe it does feed into vaccine hesitancy, some of this efficacy data that is out there, whether it's J&J, Moderna, so on.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. So if you look apples to apples, all 3 vaccines available to us right now work on the most important thing we're going after, and that is hospitalizations and deaths. All 3 vaccines. If you're offered the J&J, you should get it. If you're offered the Moderna, you should get it. What happened with J&J is that this vaccine was studied in a different population and a little later. So some could argue that it wasn't set up the same way in that variants were included when J&J was studied. So when we look at headline efficacy data, these vaccinations were not compared head to head. And in fact, some could argue J&J had a different setup in terms of the population and the variants. So I think we need to let the public know all 3 are comparable on what we care about most, and that is hospitalizations and death.
That is a really good point about Johnson & Johnson, and one that I haven't heard before. I want to ask you about healthcare spending, because this is something that you really have a lot of expertise in as well. Whether we're looking at this coronavirus aid package that looks set now to become law shortly, or then an infrastructure bill, where do you think the healthcare infrastructure and spending priorities need to be?
Yeah, it needs to be, in regard to the vaccine, it needs to be on logistics and distribution and getting out to seniors and populations at risk. It has to be equitable. This virus doesn't go away if we only address parts of the United States or even just the United States. This is a global pandemic. The virus doesn't know borders, and it doesn't self-select except for the very most at risk, and that is our seniors. So I'm most concerned about the seniors. I'll remain to be concerned about the seniors as long as I'm on this show. Most of the seniors over age 65 have been the ones that have really been unfairly targeted by the virus. The highest death rate, 80% of the deaths still sit in over 65. Also noteworthy that most people over age 75 that are female live alone. And being alone has shown a real harsh reality in terms of loneliness, higher morbidity and mortality. And I think that doesn't go away after the virus. So I think what we do with this aid package has to look and be directed at those most at risk. It's not me and it's not you. It's our seniors and our poor. And I really hope we can get more laser focused on where that package and resources go.
Meghan, are seniors and the poor, just staying on that point, are they at greater risk now as some of these states roll back mask mandates?
Yeah, I think they're at huge risk. I just shared the numbers. Not all of them are vaccinated. So if you're in a state where you haven't been vaccinated, you're high risk, and we're taking away a mask mandate right now, you've got to get to a level where you're close to herd immunity to start pulling back like that, or you're putting people that haven't been vaccinated at risk. I don't understand that. I don't know why you can't wait just a little longer to get these numbers up, especially with Johnson & Johnson's vaccine now being put out there. I don't know why we can't just wait another 4 weeks. We've waited a year. What's another few weeks?
And Meghan, I should just give you a personal shout out as well as sort of a societal shout out. You're helping some of those women living alone that you were talking about get those vaccines, including my own mother-in-law, who have a lot of troubles in some cases navigating the technology that it takes to get these vaccine appointments. But finally, I want to ask you, it being International Women's Day and you being the guest who's kicking off our amazing guest lineup here today, as someone who is a former nurse who then rose in her career to become an investor in healthcare, what do you think needs to change, particularly in your industry, still, when it comes to gender parity and gender involvement and equity in private equity and in healthcare?
Yeah, private equity is tough. 15% of the partners are females. That is a really low level of participation at the most senior level. Always some good news in the story. The good news is 50% of the workforce in the financial services community is female. So we have a pipeline that we can develop, train, and grow. However, we have to be able to give females exposure to P&L roles, understanding more non-traditional paths into finance like I did. I came into private equity out of corporate America. That's not a traditional path. Most people say you have to be in banking, and that's not true. So I think in some corridors of the financial community, the Wolf of Wall Street may be long gone, but his shadow still lurks. And I think we have to do a better job about elevating women and giving them opportunity. Out of 100 public financial institutions, only 6 females are CEOs. So we have a long way to go, but I'm most optimistic about the pipeline, that females are interested in finance. They're important to finance. Also, when you look at the data, there isn't a different return for females than there is males. We need to publish that data. We need to do more to bring that forward so LPs aren't nervous or given an excuse not to give money to females. But simply stated, more females need to run money. They need to be in a decision-making position because they'll hire more females. 2 of my first hires were senior females when I was running a fund. So females bring their network, they bring their Rolodex, and they're a lot more plugged into the high talent that needs to be put in place.
Lifting each other up. I love it. Meg, it's always great to hear from you. Meghan Fitzgerald is a private equity investor, author of Ascending Davos, and healthcare policy professor at Columbia University. Thanks so much, Meg. Appreciate it.